position, too many men on the field, Saskatchewan.
Gizmo has a block and the sidelines. He has not stepped out. He may go all the way. He needs one block and he'll do it easily.
Promise Mess I wouldn't do this.
McDavid stops up. What a move. Shoots. Scores!
Hey, it's another edition of The Outsiders. Bryn Griffiths along with Robin Brownlee. It is episode and podcast number 42. How you doing today, other than trying to stay warm?
Oh, it's all good, Bryn. I'm just fine, raring to go.
You can't complain too much about the way this winter has gone. You know what we're getting right now in the Edmonton area? Anyway, we're getting what's called winter.
Winter. And we're getting winter at a time when my furnace has decided to bite the weenie.
Oh,
and awaiting yet another technician to come over with dollar bill signs in his eyes.
You must have one of those high deficiency furnaces, right? Is that what you got?
It is highly deficient. Yes, indeed.
Well, let's talk about all the stuff that's been going on, and let's kick things off with the NHL North. Big win for the Edmonton Oilers in Winnipeg with 0.7 seconds to go. That was a win they absolutely needed. And if they can find a way to win the next one, as much as we don't like to date our podcast too much, but from an Edmonton perspective, they need these two wins just to get back into the pack. Because as we've been talking, if you fall too far behind really early, you're never going to catch up, because every night, because everybody's playing everybody, somebody is going to gain points on you or stay ahead of you. So they need to get back into the pack as fast as possible. That was a tough one for Winnipeg too last night.
Well, I didn't expect the Jets to be there at the end, actually. I thought they'd run out of legs, to be honest with you, with a late start the night before and back-to-back. And when the Oilers started taking it to them in the second period, I thought they might run away with it. Wrong again. But, you're right. In this division setup, you can't go 0 for 2 in any of these back-to-backs with anybody. You just bury yourself. And, the Jets have been playing really well early, maybe a little bit better than some people thought they would. The Oilers have been up and down, needed that win. And you know what? You need another one the next time out, too, against the Jets. Then you come home feeling a little bit better about yourselves. But a lot of eyes on that division because of the nature of it. We always talk in past years about 4-point games. Well, now they're all 4-point games. They're all within the division, and you just can't go on a slide or you bury yourself in a hurry.
I was thinking about this as I watched Toronto and Calgary play in the afternoon tilt, and that was the fact that if somebody was to go on a 6 or an 8 game winning streak, that you're pretty much in. Like you could really pull away from the pack if you put together a really great streak. But right now, I'm not really sure anybody's going to do that. Toronto's been okay. Calgary's been okay. Everybody's been okay. Even Ottawa's been okay. So somebody eventually is going to start to put it together, and you just got to stay close right now. The Edmonton Oilers also have to be encouraged by the play of Jesse Puljujärvi, who, not to my surprise, not to your surprise, I don't think anybody's surprised. He's finally started to develop into an NHL player, and he's playing a 200-foot game.
Well, the thing about Jesse is this, and I used to get sick of hearing it, and some people took that as me not liking the kid. I grew weary in a hurry of, he's not being given a chance. He's not being given a chance. Well, guess what? You don't necessarily get given anything. In a perfect world, are you put in the best situation to succeed? Well, sure. But every player's agent could say that. Well, I want my guy with better players. Jesse never really ran out and grabbed it as a kid. And let's face it, he was rushed into the league. Not his fault, but his problem. And he never put together a string of games where he went, yeah, that kid looks ready. Whether you can't, you have no control over whether the puck goes in for you or not. But if you're getting chances and you're playing the right way, sooner or later, it works. But, give him a chance. No, take a chance, earn it. That's what he's done this year. Even though the numbers haven't been great, I don't think he was spectacular early on, but he was always hard on the puck. He was always in the middle of the traffic instead of on the perimeter. And he earned the shot that he got late in Toronto with McDavid in the last few minutes, and then last night. And he had a hell of a game. I don't remember a better game from Jesse Puljujarvi. He's had games where he had more points. He's had a 3-point game in a win over the Canucks a couple of years ago, and he got the game-winning goal. That was a nice game, but man, he was just all over it in this one, and that's what you need. He's 22 years old now. He's grown into a big, strong man instead of a big, lanky teenager, and maybe there's something there. I'm not going to decree that he's arrived because of one game, just like I don't believe you talk about him in terms of a bust if he has a stretch where he's not good. And some people suggested that when he decided to stay home and play in Europe. Hell of a game last night. Let's see some more of it. But you know what? It's like found money. He was away for a year. Some people were writing him off. Now he's back, different player. So let's see what happens.
Coming up a little bit later on, we're going to be chatting with Brent McIntosh of the McIntosh Group, who are fine sponsors of our podcast. And we'll talk to Brent because he's got a little bit of an interesting sports background with me. We'll explain that coming up in a little bit. But right now we're going to get to Rob Vanstone, who is a longtime writer with the Regina Leader-Post. Obviously going to talk about the NFL, Tom Brady. The Packers decision was a weird one. KC looked pretty sharp, right? So we'll get into that. Plus, Henry Aaron passed away this week, and we got to talk about Hank. Wow, what a classy guy he was. And speaking of classy guys, we also lost his chief, George Armstrong, longtime Maple Leaf captain. So we'll obviously talk with Rob about that. And you want to bring something up about the World Juniors from 1991, I hear.
Well, it's funny, we got Vanstone coming on. I got to give him a shot. That whole week, and I've talked about it before, it was cold as hell. I mean, that's where hockey writers gathered, of course, every World Junior. We're from Canada. We get the cold. We're going to Saskatoon and Regina. We get it. It won't be golf shirt weather. But I was reading a column that Vanstone did a couple of years ago talking about some of the embarrassing moments in his career.
Well, don't say it here. Just blow it by him when we get maybe that's a bad term to use here. But we're going to get him on here in a couple of seconds. So don't say it here. Just throw it right at him and let's see how he reacts to it, okay?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good call right there. Let's see what he's got to say for testing the elements as he did.
Yes, and did he have a license to sell hot dogs? We'll get into all of that with Rob Vanstone from the Regina Leader-Post coming up next. I don't even know where to start with you. We go back a long, long way to, this has got to be, what year? 1980 what?
5. I remember it well. I was a journalism student at the University of Regina, and you were the voice of the Warriors. And I got a press pass to go to Regina Pats games, and I was sitting in the press box wearing my brown Mr. Bean suit. And I sat beside this nice person named Brent Griffiths. And when you're just starting out, you don't have anything on a resume except I graduated from Campbell Collegiate somehow in 1982, and suddenly another media person actually acknowledges your existence and is nice to you and chatty. That was amazing. And I planned to go to Edmonton that Christmas just with my friends Mark and Roxanne Anderson over the holidays. And the Oilers were at home to Philadelphia. And I remember saying to you, I wonder, is there any way I could get media credentials for this game? And you said, oh, yeah, you just you contact the Oilers and you ask for Elaine L., which I did. I got media credentials. I was in a scrum with Wayne Gretzky when I was just completing my first semester of journalism school, and that was because I sat next to the amazing Brent Griffiths in the Agrodome press box in November of 1985.
We had a lot of fun, and Robin, who's in Kamloops, man, You just can't say enough about the Western Hockey League or junior hockey. I mean, it was just so much fun, and still is for you, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's always been something that I've loved. I mean, my dad used to be the Regina Pats organist, and so from 71 to 74, I sat in a green folding chair in the doorway of the green organ booth in one end of the Regina Exhibition Stadium, and watched every Pats game for 3 years, including the Memorial Cup season in '74. So that's how far back junior hockey goes for me as an interest and as a passion. It's something I shared with my dad.
Now, Bryn, you said you didn't know where to start with Rob because you go back so far. I remember Rob in the Western Hockey League when I was covering the Blazers. But there's one moment that jumps out at me more than that, and I was reading a column by Rob this morning, and it was kind of it brought me back to the World Junior Championship at Sask Place and down in Regina. And Rob wrote a column a couple years back about some of the embarrassing moments he's had on the job. And one of them was showing up for the Russian team's flight and discovering, at a time when it was already, shall we say, bone-chilling cold, and realizing his zipper was open. How the hell do you do that on the coldest day of the year?
It's too bad they didn't put me on the no-fly list. Well, the Russians, it was such a cold day, and their flight was delayed. And they were supposed to get in late at night. And eventually I was told that the Russians they've been diverted and they won't be coming until the morning. So I went home from work and went to bed. And I lay down, and all of a sudden the phone rings, and it's one of the organizers. He says, he basically said the Russians are coming. And they're going to be arriving in the airport in 15 minutes. So I got dressed in an awful hurry, and it was so cold throughout that entire tournament, and just made a beeline toward the airport. And I go running into the entrance, and fortunately they hadn't arrived yet. And so I had time to ponder my appearance, and realizing that I looked disheveled, thought I would just assess the spectacle that I was at that point. And to my horror, I found out that my fly was open. That's about as vivid a memory as I have of the 91 World Juniors, because it was just so embarrassing, and one of those signature moments of a career.
So that was your highlight of that event, getting a little frost on your dootney. So anyway, that's quite amusing. Hey, let's talk about the Western League though before we move on here. What are you hearing? Like, what's going on? Are they gonna play?
They sound like they're absolutely determined to play, and good for them. I don't know how it's going to be done financially. They've received some assistance, at least in Saskatchewan, from the provincial government. Each of the 5 Saskatchewan-based teams is getting $600,000, which will help them a little.
Yeah.
I think from a developmental standpoint, they want to be able to get their players on the ice for at least 24 games, and if they can't do that, does that hurt them marketability wise as far as players are considering playing in the Western Hockey League down the road? I think showing that kind of commitment to playing I think it's a good message to players and parents that may reap benefits in years to come. I wonder, considering the importance of not only the Western Hockey League but major junior hockey to the National Hockey League from a developmental standpoint, will the NHL be kicking in any money to help them out here? And they've got their own challenges playing without fans. And Gary Bettman said recently the amount of money they're going to lose is in the billions instead of millions. But
yeah,
there'll be a little top up from the NHL to make this feasible, so their scouts can get a better read on the major junior players.
It's interesting, Rob. Everybody, big city, small town, misses hockey. At least in the National Hockey League, you can watch it on television. Not to overstate, but the Western Hockey League is still a lot of smaller towns where, let's face it, if you don't have hockey to be interested and invested in over the winter, there's not a lot of other things to do whether you go to the real small markets like the Jaw and the Hat and pick your city, it really is the lifeblood of a lot of these communities, isn't it?
Yeah, we really notice it in Saskatchewan from that standpoint because of the 5 WHL franchises in Saskatchewan, 3 are community owned. And I mean, in Swift Current, you could take every resident of Swift Current and put them in some larger WHL venues and still have seats left. That's I can't believe the disparity when you look at there's a Swift Current in the same league as a Calgary, and yet they're able to make it go. Prince Albert, Moose Jaw, same thing, and the teams are synonymous with the communities. And not to say that that's not the case with the Saskatoon Blades or Regina Pats, but there's also there's such an identity there. There's such an instant identification, and it's a real void not only for the hockey teams, but for the economy as a whole. When you consider the restaurants, the hotels, the hospitality industry, that I think has a symbiotic relationship with the junior hockey teams. We really noticed the lack of sports here in Saskatchewan. Not that it's undetected anywhere else, but if you live in any of the you look at any of the provinces to the west of us, to the east of us, until you get to the Maritimes, there's at least the NHL to give you that so-called infusion of local sports. But here, without an NHL team in Saskatchewan, there's really, and without the Rough Riders having played this year, we really feel it. And we're kind of a tweener market that way, and just there's no Calgary Flames to cheer for. There's no Winnipeg Jets to cheer for. It seems like there's absolutely everything is gone here just by nature of the sports teams we have to support. So you really feel it. We've got 12 Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League teams that are not dissimilar to the Moose Jaw Warriors, Prince Albert Raiders, and Swift Current Broncos, and they're feeling it. And they've received the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League has received $1 million from the provincial government. So, yeah, it's really a blow to these communities, and just it's tough enough to get through these endless winters without a hockey game to go to. That's something I really feel. I go to a lot of the Pats games, not only professionally, but I go with my wife and we sit behind one of the nets and just have a nice night out. And I miss doing that. I just love to go to a hockey game and eat popcorn again. But there are tougher things to deal with in this world, and eventually we'll get through this and we'll be something resembling normalcy, I would hope.
Hey, if the Pats went just a couple of blocks away, they could be skating on the largest ice surface in the largest arena in the Western Hockey League. Why did they think of flooding the field at Mosaic? Like, I saw pictures. It looks great.
It's amazing. And they had a media escape before they opened up to the general public. And it was open for 45 minutes, which was good because it gave me time to do one lap. And it was just... It's the first time I put skates on in 20 years, and I wore a pair of skates that I bought in 1987. So our photographer showed up and our videographer showed up, both in the Leader Post, and my skates were older than both of them. It was so cool to get out there and just a little bit mournful, a little bit bittersweet, because I just looked around and there's this amazing facility that we never could have dreamed of when I was growing up, or even 15 years ago. And suddenly it's dormant and there's this massive rink. And it's been so popular. Like every Monday at noon, registration takes place. And every Monday by about 12:01 p.m., it's full.
Wow.
And I hope they do it every winter. It'd really be, I think it'd be cool for some other communities to do. It's just a really nice, fun thing to do. And I can't imagine what it'll be like when more than 30 or 50 people get out there or can get out there.
You have the dubious honor, as do I, of being a Denver Broncos fan. We go that far back. I know how my connection came about because the guy who owned the team spent a lot of his life in Edmonton. How did you get stuck being a Broncos fan?
I've asked myself that these past 5 years. Before 1978, we didn't have cable television in Regina, and my only link to the National Football League was through radio stations emanating from the United States. We only got games in on CBC back then once the CFL season was over. So my dad was a big radio nut, and I was a big radio nut. So I go down the dial looking for American sports at night, and it was pretty tough to miss KOA Denver at 8:50.
Yep.
And it's called the Blowtorch for a reason, Clear Channel, and that's how I got started listening to NFL games and Denver Bronco games in particular. Plus, they had Denver Nuggets games back then, so that was late years of the ABA, early years of the National Basketball Association, and they had David Thompson, who was spectacular. So I just listened to KOA all the time, and I couldn't help but become a Bronco fan. I actually started out as a bit of a Steeler fan, and just over time, it was more Broncos, less Steelers, and I loved the 77 season helped. It was a year before we got cable TV. The Broncos go 6-10-12-2. They beat the Raiders in the AFC final and are on to their first Super Bowl. And there was something about that team that I just fell absolutely in love with. And over the years, it just got worse and worse. And over the last 5 years, they've just got worse and worse. But absolutely love the Denver Broncos and just live and die with them.
Rob, I got to tell you, that's absolutely bizarre. Not your fandom of those two teams. My first team that I cheered for, Pittsburgh Steelers. My second team, Denver Broncos.
Wow.
Bought the jersey. I remember going to Mile High Stadium early years on the hockey beat. It was just across the parking lot from the Colorado Avalanche rink, McNichols Arena then. And I remember just standing there thinking it was some sort of shrine. And let's face it, it wasn't that great a stadium, but it was a place that I'd always identified with. It's odd. I didn't know that about you. Hey, let's move north of the 49th for football, because that's the next obvious thing. We're talking about, the Western Hockey League in the Prairies. What about the Canadian Football League? I mean, to me, and I'll get killed for this here because I'm a Vancouverite. I'm not an Edmontonian. I'm a transplanted guy. Been here since '89. To me, Saskatchewan has always been the heart and soul of the Canadian Football League. You love to hate those guys with the billboards and the success they've had and the community team and everybody hopping in the car, whether they got to drive 2 hours or not. It's got to have been just awful for the people out there not to have that as part of their regular routine.
Oh, it's just been terrible. I thought about that a lot while I was skating around Mosaic Stadium and staring at the goalpost or the uprights, or the crossbar, pardon me, that Cody Fajardo hit on November of 2019, and we had November 17th, and we haven't had anything since then. There's no football for more than 400 days, and in this new stadium with this charismatic quarterback, with a team that finishes first for only the second time in the span of 43 years, and then suddenly all of this is on hold, and it's contrary to everything I've grown up with and just loved. And it's hard to believe that there wasn't a Canadian Football League season, and I'm still not certain that I can believe there will be one in 2021. It just it just boggles my mind, and I absolutely miss it. I've said this several times. I've always been one who loves Canadian football but hates Canadian Football League preseason, and I've always grumbled about them. Just get on with the regular season. These are horrible. I will never take a preseason game for granted again. I will never take a practice for granted again. I just want to do what I do and enjoy a football game and just get back to the roots of what got me into sports in the first place. And I'm not sure that's different for Stampeders fans or Eskimos fans, Lions fans, what have you. If you're a fan of the Canadian Football League, you feel this. There's not the widespread fervor in other places that there is here, but there's still, tens of thousands of people in every market that this means something to. And it's not to have a Grey Cup for the first time since 1919.
Yeah.
There's bigger things in the world, but sports is great because it's a distraction, and a lot of times from the real world, whether it's pandemics or bad news or just work or anything in general. It's one of the reasons we enjoy it. We can get our mind off things for a while sometimes, in addition to having something wonderful to watch. And the less sports there is, the more time there is to focus on COVID numbers and just wonder about things. I can hardly wait till there's a Rider game to go to. I'm not convinced there'll be one before, say, late August or September. The vaccine and the virus are going to dictate a lot of that. But won't that be sweet?
Yeah, it'll be great. Now just before we got to you today, there was an interesting story, and Robin will pass it along here in a second. But it makes me question whether or not there's a little inside information on whether or not we may see a season or not when the head coach of the Edmonton, whatever you're going to call them, his name is coming up in the U.S. with an NFL team. Robin, what was the story this morning just before we went?
Yeah, Farhan Lalji was reporting that there was interest in Scott Milanovich by the Indianapolis Colts as a quarterbacks coach. Saw that for the first time this morning. Don't know if it's true, although I can't imagine Farhan putting it out there. If it wasn't, don't know if there's been any permission asked to talk to him. But Scott Milanovich apparently is in the crosshairs of the Indianapolis Colts.
It just makes me wonder whether or not there's something we're not hearing.
Yeah, I mean, and then what we're not hearing is something definitive from the Canadian Football League. And something, they put out a statement to the fans on Friday that when you really look at it, they say they plan to play and they're optimistic, but there's not an ironclad commitment such as that I think you can safely say that the Western Hockey League has made. And the longer this goes on, you wonder if some coaches, especially given the impermanency of the coaching positions in general, are going to look at other opportunities, whether it's down south or in terms of the National Football League or even colleges. And again, that just underlines the importance of just getting yourself back on the field and, if necessary, absorbing a bit of a financial hit in order to just get yourself out there. Because it's just out of sight, out of mind. This is a league that was not without its issues before the pandemic hit. It took a pandemic for the league to come clean, basically, by outlining the financial situation in which it was trying to make things go. And when Randy Ambrosi talked about the overall losses that the league and the teams incur every year, that was when he was talking to the House of Commons Committee on Finance. That was a real eye-opener. There's so much rah-rah emanating from the commissioner's office normally, but then when he had to make a plea for money, that's when you found out the degree to which the Canadian Football League was in a difficult situation. That was before the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, we don't have you for a ton of time, but so there's a couple more things we need to touch on. One is here. I saw a Sports Illustrated cover that you had put on Twitter that had been signed by Henry Aaron. It was 7:15 was the big home run for him, and I remember getting that. That was my first ever Sports Illustrated cover that I ever remember seeing come in my mailbox. As a kid, my dad said, "Do you want a subscription to SI? Let's get it." And the very first one was that episode. But Hank Aaron, what a guy who we just sadly lost this past weekend. What a guy. How did you get that autograph?
I wrote to him. I was inveterate autograph collector from 1980 to 1985. And that's pretty much all I did. I fed the dog and I wrote for autographs. And sometimes they went hand in hand, because one day I wrote to Alan Bester of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He wrote back in a week and sent an autograph back, and I left it two on a table that wasn't high enough off the ground, and my Spaniel Terrier puppy ate the Alan Bester autograph. There's still teeth marks in it. That was my dog named Pet Peeve. And but back then, it was before autographs were really huge commodities. They were more of a personal thing, and the athletes, even entertainers, weren't deluged with mail the way they are now, and they weren't suspicious of people putting it on, selling autographs. Some of the biggest names in sports would respond to mail back then. So I wrote to Henry Aaron, care of the Atlanta Braves, and within a week or two, I had his autograph.
Wow.
And that wasn't uncommon. Willie Mays, there were a lot more players who responded than who didn't. And that included Wayne Gretzky. I got his autograph through the mail. And it was a really fun time just to go through all these binders of autographs lately and see some of the names that I was able to get. It's taken me back to some really fun years. And sadly, so many of these guys are gone now. That's what really, it's hard to flip through a page or two without seeing that there's an autograph of somebody who's passed, especially some of the ones we've lost in the past year.
Yeah.
It's, what a year.
Well, Rob, we just go to the last week. George Armstrong, captain, of the Toronto Maple Leafs, all those cups. And I don't know if in your travels you got to bump into him at all, but George was, and people say this a lot when somebody passes, but it's never more true. What a gentleman, what a welcoming face in the press box to visiting writers and media. He was always just such a welcoming guy. Good run at 9 years, but really sad to see it. Chief, go.
Well, I read a story on Twitter. I think it was by Lance Hornby of the Toronto Sun. And he said one day he was musing out loud about not having a ride home from a practice or something. And George Armstrong offered him a ride home. And they had this wonderful chat. And then George Armstrong drove him home. Who does that? That's just such a nice gesture. And I think you look back on a lot of athletes of that vintage, and sadly we've lost so many of them now. I mean, everything you heard about Johnny Bauer was that he was the same type of person.
Yeah.
And there's so much class, and it's tough when a lot of the athletes that you grew up worshiping, enjoying, respecting, they're leaving us, and that's a bit of a gut punch every time it happens.
Okay, to wrap things up, it's only appropriate. And I can't tell you how much fun I had in Saskatchewan for almost 5 years hanging with you guys. One guy that always made me laugh, and I always tried to make laugh, was a guy named Warren Woods. And we lost Woodsy this past week, and he was a fixture for, was he there over 30 years? Because I just can't believe how much time has gone by.
Yeah, Woodsy started the first day that STV, now Global Regina, went on the air, September 6, 1987. And he was there for nearly 26 years, and then went to CJME Regina, a radio station, in 2013. And everybody loved him. Sometimes when people die, you're selective about what you say, and you emphasize the positive, and maybe you just gloss over some things that are less flattering. That happens from time to time. Not a lot, but there's certain times when you write an obituary and I don't think I'll mention this. With Woodsy, everything that you would say about him, everything you could possibly say about him is positive. Yeah. And I wrote a column on him in 2017, and it was pretty much a lot of the same stuff that I wrote after, sadly, he passed, because he was a fun guy. He was a great guy. He was one of these people that made you feel like you were the most important person in his world, even if you ran into him for 10 seconds or 20 seconds at a hockey game. And just instantly welcoming, just not unlike Bryn Griffiths in the Agridome press box in 1985. They're just one of those people who was just instantly likable and didn't judge. Wasn't nice to people because there was an agenda, because it was advantageous to curry favor with somebody. Just tremendously nice, funny, engaging, warm person. And he was diagnosed with COVID-19 in late November, and it sounded like it was going to be okay. A GoFundMe page went up, and the goal was $50,000, and within a day that amount was exceeded. And wow. That was founded with the I think the expectation that there was going to be a recovery, but a long one. And then suddenly it just turned, and we lost Woodsy last Wednesday, and it's just such a blow. It's just, so many people have said, I'd love to hear that laugh again. I'd love to hear that chuckle again. I'd love to see him again. And it's still hard to really digest that someone who meant so much to all of us could be gone so quickly. And it's been a sobering week around here. And
yeah,
we've lost more than 250 people in Saskatchewan after COVID, and look at the numbers across Canada and the U.S. There's just so many of these stories, and it's just so sad. And there's families who aren't publicly, but certainly as sincerely are grieving the losses of people. And it's just when it's somebody you know and really loved, that's when it really drives it home that it's not just statistics anymore. These are people that you care for.
Well said. And as for Woodsy, a lot of laughs, a lot of beers, a few house parties. And I was always welcomed in Regina as the voice of the Moose Jaw Warriors, and I always appreciated. When you guys actually came to Moose Jaw, it was a lot of fun, too. We always opened up our climate-controlled press location at the Civic Center for you guys freezing your ass off just down the hall here. Rob Carney and I were boxed in a glass thing with a heater on, and it's always fun to have you guys.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was great. We always tried to take the tropical plants out, though, because we had them in there in the summer, and we always thought you guys are chipping through your coffee to get to, because it froze over. Kevin Gallant and Peter Labardius and all the guys. Like I said, Miss Woodsy, and I thought we should just end on. You know what? It's so sad to lose a guy like Warren, but we've all been touched by him, and he's left a great, favorable impression with me, and I'll never forget him. And I thought we should end like that today. I hope you don't mind.
So no better way to end it, no better person to remember and reminisce about than Warren Woods.
We'll tip one back for him. Hey, Rob, thanks for your time today. This is great stuff. We got to do it again, okay?
I love that, Bryn, and thanks so much, Robin. And Bryn, go Broncos. 2021 is the year.
It's only appropriate we would have Brent McIntosh on from the McIntosh Group because he's a sponsor of our fine podcast, and he joins us today, and there's a reason why he's here. One, he's a sponsor of our fine podcast, and also we have a long history. We go back how far?
We go back to 930 CJCA, which would be the early 90s. I worked there from 1992 to 93. And I had the pleasure, Bryn, of being your producer on a little tiny show called Primetime Sports with Bryn Griffiths.
Yes.
Whoa. Hey, Brent, you're not telling us that you're responsible for furthering Bryn's career in the radio business, are you?
Definitely not. Bryn is a tiny bit older than me, so I'll first of all, so he was in radio first. And actually, we can blame a mutual friend of all of ours for me getting into radio because I went to university with Bob Stauffer, and he's the one that talked me into getting into radio, believe it or not, in the early 90s.
And this is how scary this whole thing is because Bob always says, Brynster, you're the one who got me on too. He'd been a long-time fixture over at the University of Alberta, but I was programming the sports station, which is now TSN 1260, when we launched as the Team 1260. We needed an afternoon guy. I know just the guy I want. So I went out and got Bob Stauffer, and so Bob and I always laughed that I'm the Dr. Frankenstein that got him started. So it's kind of a weird little world that we work in, that's for sure. And you also worked with Brian Hall because did you not also do producing for the Edmonton Eskimo broadcast back in the day?
Yeah, I was really fortunate for my short but illustrious radio career that when 930 CJCA unfortunately closed, I wasn't unemployed for too long as Brian Hall and Larry Barris were responsible for bringing me to 630 CHED so I could help out with the football broadcast there. And I spent 5 years at 630 CHED, and I spent another 5 or 6 years just doing the football games with Halsey.
Hey, did you also not work overnight shifts? Because, Larry King just passed away, longtime broadcast legend, so you would have probably been flipping the switches during his show when he was on radio.
I was a board operator and 19 years old and doing the news every 30 minutes during Larry King's show. Yeah, so it was a huge part of my radio, working the overnight shift with Larry King here in Edmonton.
you know what? He was the first really brilliant interviewer I recall. I always thought Johnny Carson was pretty good too, but that's a different setup, less newsy, obviously. And Larry said one thing that I've never quite got a handle on. Keep the questions short, keep them under 20 seconds. Man, I struggle with that. What's the key to actually asking the question and letting the guests speak? Brent, go ahead now.
Wow. I don't even know where to go with that one, Brent.
Typical news guy, right, Brent? Newspaper guy.
Yeah. Leave it as an open-ended question, and you never know. Well, it's one of the fun things about doing this podcast is that we do get a chance to talk to a lot of guys that we've known for a long time, but try to keep it as conversational as possible. And we can't thank you enough for coming on. And this podcast thing, how are you listening to the podcast? Just casually?
Well, I listen religiously every week. It automatically downloads onto my iPad, and I love the guests that you guys have had. Just a who's who of sports personalities and some amazing interviews in the past year.
So what more? Well, and thank you for that, by the way. But what are the big sports for you? What do you like to watch or listen to?
Well, yesterday was a pretty good day. Started the day with the Detroit-Chicago hockey game, 2 football games, and finished the day with an Oilers game. It doesn't get much better than that for a Sunday.
You weren't flipping back and forth between a hockey and a football game at one point?
I was at the end of the football game, yes. I started the hockey game and finished the football game back and forth. Is that what you guys were doing?
That's usually what I do around here. I don't think that remote control leaves my hand on a Sunday. I'm flipping back and forth between numerous football games or hockey games. And Robin, I'm sure you're the same.
Well, I'm just glad, and this might not be the norm because we know what COVID's done to everybody, and these are definitely first world problems, but I really enjoy just being able to sit back and watch the hockey game and come and go as I please, as opposed to, hey, how about writing that one last night in Winnipeg where the game completely changes in the last half a second, pounding off 800 words and then running for the plane. Much more relaxed pace for an old newspaper guy right now. Totally enjoy it, and I'm the king, one of the kings of the channel surfing crowd now too.
Hey, Brent, I could say this, and I do frequently on our podcast. I'm going to let you say exactly. Tell us a little bit about the biz and how it's gone, and how did you move from doing radio to this?
Yeah, it's quite the switch, and even when 2-3 weeks before I got into real estate, I was still swearing I would never be a realtor. And why would I say something like that? Both my parents were real estate agents. And so as a teenager growing up, I swore I would never do this business. We never saw my mother. Evenings, weekends, she was always working. So I thought that was a terrible job, and hence why I went into radio as a young man. When I quit the radio station back in 1998, I literally, as I said, didn't even know that I was going to end up in real estate. And lo and behold, it happened. I can tell you that it's been fantastic. I have no complaints, and I wouldn't change anything that I have done. The business itself has been pretty incredible, and the changes that we've seen just in the past year have been the most I've seen in my 22 years. Just the way that we're doing business, the way that we're selling houses. Fortunately, real estate is still deemed in Alberta anyway an essential service. So I am fortunate enough that I got to work through 2020, as there's obviously a lot of businesses out there that didn't get to work because of government shutdown. So I'm fortunate that we did get ruled as an essential service. We've just had to change the way that we're marketing properties and change the way that we're showing those properties to buyers. So now you're seeing the computer and the internet come into play even more than ever before.
You and I are doing a podcast called Just Sold with Brent McIntosh. You just kind of launched it not long ago. It's been a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot because you brought great guests on as well. How much fun has this been for you?
It's been fantastic, and one of the things that I've enjoyed most about it is almost getting back to my radio roots of broadcasting. And we've had lots of compliments for the podcast. People that I'm running into just on the street that have been listening and quoting me on some of the things that we've been talking about on the podcast. So it's just one of those extra tools that we have to get the word out on what's happening in the Edmonton real estate market.
And what about the future here? Let's kind of, we don't want to keep you too long because there's houses to sell and houses to put on the market, that kind of stuff. But how do you see 2021 lining up, not only for the Edmonton area, but also across the country?
Yeah, so it's been interesting to say the least. Here in January, the forecasters, of course, are out there trying to make their living and describe what's going to happen to the Edmonton real estate market and the Canadian real estate market. This past week, CMHC released a statement saying that the real estate prices in Canada are going to drop by 50%. And I think that that's a really irresponsible statement when they're making a blanket statement across the country. What they really meant is that they think real estate prices are going to drop in Toronto, and they don't care about the rest of the country when they say stuff like that. I would tell you that if here in Alberta specifically, it's going to be rough because of the economy, not only COVID, but obviously the energy industry has been challenging, to say the least. But if you own a single family property here in the Edmonton area, I would suggest that you're going to see a small increase in value, maybe 1% to 2% this year. Not a gigantic increase, but an increase nonetheless, just because right now what we're seeing is very few single family homes on the market. If you own a condominium, that's a little different story. Unfortunately, the Edmonton market has been overwhelmed with a huge supply of condominiums, especially downtown Edmonton, where they've built a whole bunch of new buildings, and it's really dropped the values in the past couple of years for those apartment-style downtown condominiums. And I'd suggest that that market is going to continue to fall until we get more people living here in Edmonton to buy up the inventory.
Hey, thanks for coming on with us this morning, and it's great to see your lovely face. Thankfully, this is an audio podcast for people at home, so they don't have to go through that. But your support has been fantastic, and thanks for coming on board with us. Can't thank you enough.
No, thank you guys. I appreciate the show. You guys are doing a great job. Tell everybody your website and how they can get a hold of you. They can reach us directly at 780-464-0075. Our website is macintoshgroup.ca, and our podcast, which, Bryn, you are the host of, is called Just Sold with Brent McIntosh.
Okay, so there we go. Both Rob Vanstone and Brent McIntosh on the podcast today with some great stories. Hey, do you have anything, Hank Aaron? You have a Hank Aaron story before we move on? Other than just watching him and watching how he guided his career. And I think the only juice he was on was orange juice. I don't know. I mean, he just seemed like he was about as classy an individual and an athlete as you were ever going to see. Plus, also, we can talk about Jackie Robinson all we want, but he went through an awful lot to break that Babe Ruth record and went through a lot of tough times and death threats, Robin.
Yeah, when Karen passed, I remember tweeting out that the age I am, the best two players I ever saw as a young kid, not the best two players, but that I saw, were Mickey Mantle and Hank Aaron, right in that time slot. Great players before that, obviously, a lot of great players after. But I just remember watching this man and highlights for what they were back then. They weren't as easily had as now. I thought, man, and I was never any good at playing ball, but I thought, those guys are just great, Mickey Mantle, Yankees. Hank Aaron, who's this guy that keeps on hitting home runs? And I kept thinking, even though I was a kid, who's this little guy? Because, well, he wasn't little. I mean, he was 6 feet and about $180 or so.
Yeah.
That's not Mark McGuire. That's not, the monsters that hit the big ball today. He just had a sweet swing and he made contact. And as a kid, before there's any politics and any social things creep into it that Mr. Aaron had to put up with while he was playing, I just remember thinking, man, those guys are great.
Hey, to kind of wrap things up, let's just touch on a couple of NFL things that we didn't touch on through the podcast today. The Green Bay Packers. What's with that call? Like, what were they thinking there? Why did they do what they? Why? I'm still speechless over that whole episode.
Well, if you saw the post game with Aaron Rodgers, he was pretty much speechless too. He couldn't come up with a real good answer, and really, what's he going to say when someone else makes the call? You know, it was bizarre, and some people would make the somewhat cruel joke. He had a Jason Moss moment there. It didn't make sense to me. The bigger story, though, for me is Tom Brady. Like, is there some cosmic rule that he has to play in every Super Bowl or what?
Well, I get it. I'm actually getting a little tired of people just, I know what success does. People just don't want to see the same guy winning and winning and winning and winning all the time, but there's a reason for it. I've watched a lot of great NFL quarterbacks, and being a Denver Broncos fan, Peyton Manning's right there for me, but Tom Brady is just one notch up, and he's going back to the Super Bowl again. It's going to be T-Bay and Kansas City, but I just think at some point, when are people going to lay off, or is that ever going to happen? I know people don't like him. Is it because he's too perfect? What is it? Like, I can't get my head wrapped around that.
I think it's sadly a little bit typical today. He's successful. He's good looking. He's wealthy. He's a lot of the things that a lot of people wish they were. And there's some people that after a while, they just want to tear that down. How do you argue against Tom Brady at this point? I've never been his biggest fan, not out of dislike. Just, hey, for the longest time, the Patriots are the Patriots, and that's a juggernaut. But if you don't give the man his due, man, you aren't paying attention.
And how about Tampa Bay? They get to the Stanley Cup final. They win it. Huh. They're in the World Series. They don't win it. And now they're going to the Super Bowl. Yep. Probably not going to win it the way KC plays these days. But it still may be fun, and I don't want to write the old guy off like I might have done a few years ago because he keeps winning. And their defense is pretty damn good, too.
Yeah, that's a fun town to be in right now, isn't it?
The weird part is that they're going through this wonderful sports year and nobody can go to a game. It's the strangest thing. I mean, it's just bizarre.
Yep.
Hey, listen, thanks for your time today, and thanks for your time this week, and lots more stuff coming up. Like I said, there were a lot of moments this past week when I went, what's with that? Like I was scratching my melon more than once or twice over weird calls and strange things that had happened and things that I'd seen online. So it was just, it was a fun week. If you're a sports fan, you got to love the way things are playing out. Thanks for your time. Get that furnace fixed, will you?
Yeah, I think I better look after that, huh?
Yeah, exactly. All right, we'll talk to you next week.
In the meantime, and in between time, that's it. Another edition.